Les Hinton, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, Zainab. It's good to be here.
What was it like working alongside Rupert Murdoch for more than 50 years?
It was hard work. It was stirring. It was exciting. It was infuriating, and occasionally it was agony. But there were great years over a long period of time. I began as a 15-year-old buying him his sandwiches in the morning, and I ended up running a large company in New York.
So quite a meteoric rise from sort of fairly humble beginnings. But you say in your memoirs, maybe News Corp was a personality cult. Maybe, surely it was, or it wasn't?
It depends how you define a personality cult, but he certainly dominated the company. And it's certainly true that describing it as a personality cult didn't actually occur to me until I'd left the company, which may be, in and of itself, proof of the fact that it was. Surely
it must have occurred to you that this man with so much power, you know, that it was a personality cult. I mean, you say that, you know, executives wanted to get close to him and very needy and wanting to, you know, always brush shoulders with Rupert Murdoch.
That's true. He was like when he was in the office, they changed. When I was running the company in London years ago, and I would announce to my executives, all very seasoned, very experienced people, Rupert's coming to town, you would see this shiver through the room, and it was a mixture of apprehension and excitement, because I really loved to have him around, but he could be, for some of them, terrifying.
Terrifying, but also he made a lot of enemies, didn't he? And you say in your book that he basically bought off many of them. You'd be quite generous with their severance pay, but he'd say to you, Les, be even more generous. I mean, he basically used his money to buy silence.
Well, that is, you're relating two things that don't really connect. My point about his generosity, well, he could be a tough employer, and he did dismiss people, but often I would, upon deciding someone should leave, or upon he and I agreeing they should be, I would take the action and I would describe to him what severance I was proposing in those situations. And these would be editors or executives that hadn't quite worked out. He was always generous with them. It wasn't, they had nothing to be silent about. He was just being generous with them.
But you did also say that you and others fantasised about being able to have enough money so that you could go and say goodbye. I won't say it because it was rather,
I think probably not,
rather obscene the way you put it. But anyway, you just, you know, get lost, or less polite words, Rupert.
It was, look, the fact is there was a lot of pressure working for him, and I suppose there was something like a blitz spirit. And so we would fantasise that if we had enough money and he was being especially difficult, that we would be able to knock on the door and he'd say, "Yes, Les," and I'd say, "Rupert," and then I would use the curse that ended with "off," and we always have a good laugh. But so when there's a question of humour and some apprehension working for him, but I always had, for instance, a plastic GI helmet in my office with a razor blade, a plastic razor blade stuck to it. And the joke was, when he called me up and I knew, say, his assistant at the time had a great way of giving you sandwich, she'd say, and she'd say to me, "Put your helmet on, love." And I knew, therefore, it was going to be a bad conversation.
Right.
But it wasn't a question of living in mortal fear. It was a question of dealing in your way with the tension of working for him.
But a lot has been said about the fact that he's got very strong political views. To what extent do you think his newspaper empire reflected his own personal views? I mean, would he pick up the phone to editors and say, "Look, I think you should do this"?
He expressed his views a lot, but he was careful about how he did it. First of all, obviously, there's this talk of Rupert's sort of dictating to all his editors what they think and say.
Yeah.
And that's not actually true in the way it's expressed, because obviously he played a part in choosing the editors, and he chose like-minded editors. That didn't mean that on many occasions, the editors would do things that didn't please him.
Really? Because I want to give you a quote which has been disputed by Rupert Murdoch, attributed to the veteran journalist Anthony Hinton, no relative. He asked Rupert Murdoch in 2016 why he was so opposed to the European Union, because, of course, he backed Brexit.
Yeah.
And Rupert apparently replied, "That's easy. When I go to 10 Downing Street, where the British Prime Minister lives, they do what I say. When I go to Brussels, they take no notice."
Well, I never heard him say that or anything like it. I mean, he cared a great deal about. He is very interested in politics, and he's very interested in media, and he's very interested in news. But
you never heard him say that. But does it sound right? Does it ring true?
No, because I was on many occasions with him at Downing Street or at dinners with politicians. But it is a bit of a myth. In fact, it's a complete fiction to imagine that he somehow was able, with some mysterious power, to dictate to these politicians what they should do, because he clearly didn't.
But they went in and out. They all courted him. Tony Blair, whom he famously backed. So if he wasn't that influential or powerful, why would the politicians all be lining up to see him?
Well, that's a great question. Politicians long since have attributed enormous power to newspapers to influence general elections.
And rightly so.
Well, that's debatable. That's what I would
Is it? Because I have to tell you, though, just before we go on to that point, it's debatable, you say, but the Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, when he lost the general election to John Major in 1992,
yes.
This is what he said. He said, never in the past 9 elections has the anti-Tory, anti-Labour press come out so strongly in favour of the Conservatives. Never has their attack on the Labour Party been so comprehensive. This was how the election was won. So Neil Kinnock's mind, no doubt, he lost the election because of the anti-Labour press.
Well, then if he's saying if the press were more supportive of him, he would have won. And I think, as with most politicians, it's very rare, and there are other examples more recent, for a politician not to find excuses other than their own shortcomings. And just as in '97, when we supported Blair in that election, there was this great talk about how we'd actually helped Blair win. But the truth is that Blair was far beyond the need of any kind of assistance from anybody, and had no need to be...
But the newspaper, I mean, the Sun newspaper, which is the most widely read newspaper in the United Kingdom, it said after the defeat of Labour, it was the Sun what won it. Sorry, terrible grammar, but anyway, that's what it said.
It was good Sun grammar.
Yeah, it was good Sun grammar. It was the Sun what won it. So the Sun itself is saying, look, you know, we've got all this influence and power.
I know, but they did, yes. But it's silly of them, because they didn't, no one knew. I mean, it was a close election. It was a very close election, and you could argue on the margin that will have made some difference. But Neil Kinnock stood for election, and Neil Kinnock lost.
But the point I'm making is obviously that, you know, there's this overweening power of this press baron, Rupert Murdoch, and, you know, he's not elected, and, you know, people are uncomfortable with that. So now, if you look at his plans to try to take full control of the pan-European broadcaster Sky, the UK regulator, Britain's Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, says the Sky acquisition would give the Murdoch family too much control over news providers across all media platforms, and therefore too much influence over public opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, you agree with that?
I agree that that was what they said, but it's also true that the European Commission, who are much more historically strict on matters of monopoly and antitrust, they cleared it back in 2011.
But what do you think? But it's a fair comment, isn't it? It's justified concern.
It's justified to be concerned, but if you consider that to all intents and purposes, for 20 years, Sky News, which is the principal news outlet he has in this country, for 25 years, his company has been effectively in control of it. They own 30% of the shares, and there's never been a murmur about the...
So you think it should go ahead? You think it should, obviously?
I think that the argument that obviously with these deals there are other issues to do with monopolies.
But it's this idea of concentrating too much influence over public opinion.
Yes, and that's a fair point. But honestly...
So it is a fair point.
You've made a fair point, except that I think, with respect, you're fighting an old battle, because the dissemination of news now, the atomization of news opinions, the access of a wide variety of points of view online, through Facebook, through Google. I mean, there's a massive variety.
So newspapers are no longer as influential as they were, obviously.
Nowhere near so
going
influential.
down.
But of course, what's replacing this concern, which is now a bit dated, is the power and the anarchy of the internet, where things can be said to millions of people in this country from outside from areas where there's no libel control, there's no slander control, there's no ethical control. So that's the real modern argument, and I think politicians...
It doesn't preclude you being concerned about what News Corp is doing.
But I think some politicians in this country who have developed this passion against Rupert they're fighting an old battle. That's not the argument anymore, is my view.